Last time we talked about the beginning of the astrophotography journey, but this time we will dive deep into the matter and discuss more advanced equipment, methods and software. Because astrophotography can always improve, but let's do it the right way. No more fooling around. You know that this hobby means tracking, stacking and caffeine. But have you ever heard of things like drift alignment, half-lux diameter or diffraction spikes? Time to get real. You know that my favorite type of telescope is a refractor. Small, simple, forgiving. But what are the important aspects when choosing your companion? The first thing I look at is the glass. How many lenses there are and what material it is. A doublet will be the least expensive, but you will encounter distortion and false colors very soon. A triplet like this one can do a lot of awesome stuff, but your wallet may say nay. They have good color correction and most of them have dedicated field flatteners. Those little devices will flatten out the field of view and remove distortion at the edges. And a well-built quad will blow your mind in terms of sharpness and flat field-ness. And in terms of price. On your first telescope purchase you should not look after the glass. But if you stumble over FPL 53, that's good. If you don't know what to get for starting, a small doublet is great. However, there are big differences in quality. A good quality doublet is way better than a cheap triplet. It's always helpful to read some reviews and check the images out others took with that scope. If you have been browsing DSLRs for astrophotography, you may have seen that Canon is basically the only thing you can find. When DSLRs were first used in astrophotography, Nikon had a small problem with the software, but just a small one. The hot pixel detection removed the stars. Luckily today this issue is fixed, and nowadays Nikon and Canon are both pretty equal at astrophotography. However, on the market and on the second-hand market you will mostly find Canon, a byproduct of older times. A basic DSLR like the 750D is ideal for a deep sky rig. It's not the biggest price point to encounter. But what about these DSLRs or mirrorless dedicated astronomy cameras like the Canon EOS RA? For travel on a small star tracker with a stock lens? Yeah, why not? But on a telescope in your backyard? Hell no. The amount of tracking, stacking, editing, calibrating, there is a quality, and not in a mirrorless camera without cut filter. But you want to use that DSLR with a go-to mount at the telescope? Get a modified one. In a nutshell, stock DSLRs contain an infrared filter that suppresses the most important light in astrophotography, hydrogen alpha. The second-hand market is filled to the brim with modified versions of Canon cameras. And the web also contains many tutorials on how to do that modification yourself, if you dare. Now you might ask, do I really need to get a modified camera? That discussion alone would burst the time frame of this video, and that's why I already have one about this topic. But as a guideline, if you already spend $1,500 on a go-to mount and telescope, this small amount of money for a modified camera is nothing. Shutter cable? Come on, we want to do it right. Most photographers control their equipment with a laptop. If you already have one, great, let's talk the software. The camera, auto-guiding and mount are controlled mostly by one or two sets of software. Most popular are Astrophotography Tool, Sequence Generator Pro and SharpCap. All of those have trial versions and need to be purchased afterwards. But if you want something for free, try out nighttime imaging in astronomy. For imaging with the DSLR, I recommend either APT or Backyard EOS. Auto-guiding will be done by PhD2 guiding, but that's another topic. This is the amount of knowledge in astrophotography, and some people make it seem like guiding takes up this much. Your mount is tracking the night sky slowly, but nothing in this hobby is perfect, and even this tracking might not be precise enough. You may not see it in a 30-second exposure, but with longer focal lengths and exposures up to 5 minutes, this small error in tracking will result in blurred stars. Let's correct this error by using auto-guiding. A small Guidescope is running on the top of the main scope, but you may know that already. And way too many people text me with, how do I flatten the curve? Do a solid polar alignment. That takes up 50% of good guiding. If you do it with a polar finder scope, make sure that this little guy is collimated. I will leave a link to a great tutorial down below. And the thing I see very often, choose a guide exposure time of at least 1 second. The guide camera is supposed to follow the movement of the star. But the flickering of the atmosphere, called seeing, looks something like this. You don't want to follow that movement, so go for maybe 2-second exposures to average the seeing out of existence. The sky moves around Polaris, and the mount should do the same. The first step in the night is the so-called polar alignment. Equatorial mounts, like this one over there, contain a polar finder scope. In this one you see a reticle on which you can center Polaris in the middle. Simple as that? Not really. This is Polaris. Now watch. It's not perfect, and that error alone is enough to throw off tracking. The reticle of the polar finder scope will show the position Polaris needs to take, and you can check its current position with an app like Polar Finder or Polar Aligner Pro. Move the Alt-S bolts on the mount to get Polaris right to the place where it needs to be. If you want to be more precise, use a tool like the Pole Master with a drift alignment feature. And PHG can do that as well, and it's free. Have you ever slewed to the object, looked at the preview screen and thought, where the hell is it? Now imagine that a taken image could be analyzed to extract the coordinates and tell the scope exactly where it should move. That's plate solving. I already have a video about plate solving because setting this up takes quite some time. With plate solving, one could do a bit more planning and preparation to achieve a better image composition. Let's take a look at Stellarium. This is the Iris Nebula. I can use the camera field of view feature to check its size in the frame. But is the center really the best? Activate Digitized Sky Survey and look for better framing. This looks kinda neat. Take the coordinates from the rectangle along with the camera rotation, enter them into the software of your choice and use plate solving to get right where you want. After checking the correct rotation on your camera, you may want to focus your stars in the night. You go to a bright star and now what? The easiest way to focus is a Bahtinov mask. This inexpensive tool is placed on the top of your scope and the stars will look like this. Using some longer exposures, turn the focus wheel and see this center spike going in and out. Place the droid in the center of the X to achieve perfect focus. If you don't have a mask yet, use a software tool like APT's Focus Aid. This will display a number that will describe the sharpness of the star. This number could either be the half-lux diameter or the full width half maximum. Both are good. The lower the number, the sharper the star. Turn the focus wheel and watch the number go down. I hope that I was able to give you some more insights into astrophotography. But I can only tell you one side of the story, the things I do most of the time. There are countless techniques and methods out there, and I want you to explore some more astrophotographers out there. Yes, this hobby may be unforgiving most of the times, but there is a reason why we get out every single clear night.
With a universe of infinite possibility, it's literally impossible to run out of reasons to keep photographing space.
It's reserved for those that persevere and that just crave the finish line in the form of a sweet deep sky image. Remember that if it was easy, everyone would do it, but it isn't, so it's reserved for us.
It's incredibly peaceful and gets me outside, and I can explore outer space in my own backyard and relieves lots of stress, and I'm grateful for this hobby and I love the beauty of it.
Well, because I never stop being amazed at what's possible to capture from our own backyard. And even during the day, I love capturing the sun too. It's just so much fun.
It's extraordinary pointing a camera and a telescope to a seemingly empty part of the sky and then there being a colourful nebula or a delicate galaxy there.
For us, astrophotography is about travelling back in time, looking at deep space objects from thousands and millions of light years away.
I feel this emotional connection because it makes me realize that these objects out there in space, that they are real and that we ourselves are part of this wonderful universe.
If you remember the picture from the Voyager, that's the reason why I look at the universe. We are a small speck in the cosmos.
The reason I come out in image is to inspire others, particularly young women in science, to take up STEM subjects at school and fight for their dreams, no matter how big they may be.
It's the excitement to have a whole universe in your backyard. Let's show it to the world. May the night be with us.